March 7, 1945, the Rhine River. The story of the final push into Germany is often told with a single, dramatic image. An American sergeant, Michael Dolan, strips down in the freezing dark. He ties a rope around his waist and plunges into the lethal, fast-flowing current. His mission? To swim the 300-meter-wide river, alone, and secure a line on the enemy bank. One man against Germany's last great natural defense. But faced with a river that kills in minutes and unseen enemy positions, could any soldier, no matter how brave, actually survive this? And is this how the Rhine was truly crossed? The legend of the lone swimmer is compelling, but it hides a systematic and far more terrifying reality. This is the story of the real war for the Rhine, not a single act of heroism, but a clandestine operation fought night after night. We will follow the men tasked with gathering the intelligence for the final assault, facing not just enemy machine guns, but the lethal power of the river itself. The central question is this: was the push into Germany's heartland enabled by one moment of singular bravery, or by a quiet, anonymous, and incredibly high-risk process of intelligence gathering? To find the answer, we must first understand the enemy. In March 1945, the Rhine wasn't just a river, it was a weapon, and the Germans were ready to use it. By early 1945, that weapon had brought the most powerful military force in history to a dead stop. From the Swiss border to the North Sea, the Allied armies stood on the west bank of the Rhine, staring across a formidable barrier of nature and steel. The river itself was the first line of defense. In places, it was nearly 500 yards wide, a vast, exposed killing field. Its current, swollen by the spring melt, ran at a treacherous 3 to 5 miles per hour, fast enough to spin an assault boat or sweep heavy bridging equipment downstream. The water temperature hovered just above freezing. Medical officers calculated that an unprotected man would lose consciousness from hypothermia in under 20 minutes. To fall in was a death sentence. On the far bank, the Wehrmacht was waiting. This was not the Blitzkrieg army of 1940. It was a battered, depleted force, but it was now defending its own soil with a grim determination. Allied intelligence knew the German line was not a solid wall. It was a far more sophisticated and deadly system, a defense in depth. Instead of trenches, there were thousands of camouflaged machine gun nests, dug into the riverbanks and invisible to aerial reconnaissance. Hidden behind dikes and inside village houses were the dreaded 88mm guns, their crews having spent weeks calculating the exact ranges to likely crossing points. These positions were designed to remain silent, to wait until the first waves of Allied boats were helplessly caught midstream, and then to turn the river into a perfectly engineered slaughterhouse. Behind this lethal crust of defense, mobile battle groups, the last of the Panzer and Volksgrenadier divisions, were held in reserve, ready to launch furious counterattacks and annihilate any beachhead before it could be secured. For Allied planners like Eisenhower and Bradley, the situation was a strategic nightmare. They had overwhelming superiority in men and machines, but they were effectively blind. Every day they waited, the German defenses grew stronger, but to order a frontal assault without knowing the precise location of those machine guns and 88s would be to knowingly send thousands of men to their deaths. The war machine was stalled, caught between a catastrophic attack and a costly delay. Allied command was trapped. Then, on March 7th, a single, improbable act of battlefield luck seemed to offer a way out. It looked like it would change everything, or so it seemed. That single act of luck occurred near a small town called Remagen. On the afternoon of March 7th, lead elements of the U.S. 9th Armored Division, expecting to halt at the river, were stunned by what they saw. Spanning the Rhine was the Ludendorff Railway Bridge, intact. For the Germans defending it, this was a disaster born from a cascade of errors. The demolition charges had been laid. The plan was to destroy the bridge at the last possible moment, but when the plunger was pushed, only a secondary charge detonated. The main charges, connected by a vulnerable cable that had likely been damaged by artillery, failed. A massive explosion shook the structure, but it stood firm. It was a 1 in a million failure of German engineering. For the American commander on the scene, Brigadier General William Hogue, it was a 1 in a million opportunity. His orders were to wait,
But orders couldn't account for a miracle. He made a snap decision that would echo all the way to Supreme Headquarters. We're going to cross. What followed was a 10-day race against time.
The miracle at Remagen created a single, precarious artery into Germany. As American engineers worked frantically to reinforce the damaged bridge, the U.S. Army poured over 25,000 troops and hundreds of tanks across. In response, the German High Command unleashed a furious, desperate onslaught. Artillery, the new Arado 234 jet bombers, and even V-2 rockets were all aimed at this one steel structure. The bridge had to be destroyed. But this miracle solved the problem for only one small part of the front. For General Patton's Third Army to the south and Montgomery's massive 21st Army Group to the north, the original, terrifying task remained. They still had to cross the river the hard way. To cross the Rhine the hard way meant fighting a second, secret war. A war fought not by armies, but by handfuls of men. It was a contest of stealth and silence, waged every night in the freezing blackness between the riverbanks. The prize wasn't ground, it was information, and the currency was staggering risk. For the most sensitive missions, the Allies deployed ghosts. These were men of the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, maritime unit. Not soldiers, but specialists. The forerunners of modern special forces. They entered the water equipped with technology that was pure science fiction in 1945. The heart of their gear was the Lambertson Amphibious Respiratory Unit, a closed-circuit rebreather. Unlike scuba gear that releases a telltale stream of bubbles, the LaRue recycled the swimmer's breath, scrubbing the carbon dioxide and adding a trickle of pure oxygen. The result was complete silence. A man could swim submerged for over an hour, his presence utterly undetectable from the surface. Clad in black rubber suits, with fins on their feet and a luminous waterproof compass on their wrist, they would slip into the current, alone or in pairs. Their mission? To glide beneath the surface like human torpedoes, mapping the river bottom for obstacles, checking bridge pilings for demolition charges, or surfacing silently under the shadow of the far bank to sketch enemy machine gun nests from mere yards away. They were the high-tech solution to a high-stakes problem. But there were very few of them. For every one OSS swimmer, there were 100 other patrols that relied on a far more terrifyingly simple method. These were not commandos. They were combat engineers and infantrymen, pulled from the line for a job no one wanted. Their equipment was not futuristic. It was fatally basic. A standard-issue assault boat, a fragile vessel of wood or canvas designed for a frantic daylight dash, not a silent infiltration. Their paddles were wrapped in burlap sacks or old shirts to muffle the sound of wood against water. The quietest part of their kit was also their most vital. A thin black telephone wire spooled out from the friendly bank as they went. It was their only guide home in the disorienting current and total darkness. Sometimes, a series of tugs on the line was their only way to communicate. One tug for all clear, 2 for enemy sighted, 3 for pull us back now. Their survival depended not on technology, but on a perfect, sustained, and inhuman stillness. On the east bank, other men were waiting. They were not an abstract enemy, but German soldiers, many of them older men or young boys, exhausted, cold, and fighting for their own homes. They knew the attack was not a question of if, but when and where, and they were listening. Every night, they manned listening posts dug into the frozen mud of the riverbank, their ears straining for the slightest unnatural sound. Their defenses were not a panicked reaction. They were a calculated, interlocking system of death. Along the water's edge, they had hammered stakes into the ground, stringing them with invisible tripwires connected to signal flares. A boat drifting just a few feet off course could snag one, instantly igniting the night and exposing the patrol. Further back, in camouflaged bunkers and shattered farmhouses, were the machine gun teams. For weeks, they had been carefully pre-sighting their weapons, mostly MG-42s, the infamous Hitler's buzzsaw. They had calculated the ranges and angles, creating overlapping fields of fire, invisible geometric kill zones on the water's surface. They didn't need to see the target. They only needed to hear a splash, a cough, or the metallic scrape of a canteen on a boat's hull. The result was a nightly game of cat and mouse played for the highest stakes. A single mistake, A moment of human frailty was all it took. A paddle, slippery with ice, dips too deep and makes a splash. A soldier, his lungs burning from the cold air, can't suppress a cough. A nervous foot scrapes against the wooden floorboards. For a second, there is only silence. Then, a sharp hiss and a brilliant white light. A trip flare arcs into the sky, casting stark, dancing shadows on the water. Night becomes a ghastly, artificial day. And before the men in the boat can even react, the air rips apart. From multiple directions, the MG-42s open fire. The sound is not a series of shots, but a single continuous tearing noise, like canvas being ripped. The water around the boat erupts in a spray of white geysers. Splinters fly from the wooden hull. The mission is over. The intelligence is lost. The men are gone, consumed by the river and the darkness. And now, the enemy is fully alert. The next patrol, and the one after that, will be even harder. This was the brutal, anonymous reality of gathering intelligence on the Rhine, night after night. So where does the story of the lone swimmer, Sergeant Dolan, fit into this hidden history? The story of Sergeant Michael Dolan, the lone swimmer at Remagen, is powerful. But a search of the official records of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion reveals a different reality. There is no primary military report confirming a soldier swam the river to secure a line. This doesn't mean there was no heroism. The opposite is true. The engineers of the 291st performed acts of breathtaking courage on the Ludendorff Bridge itself. Men like Sergeant Alex Drobick became the first to sprint across the structure under withering fire. Others dodged sniper rounds to find and cut the live demolition wires with hand tools, saving the bridge from certain destruction. The Dolan story appears to be a legend born after the war, a piece of powerful folklore that condenses the collective, desperate bravery of dozens of men into one symbolic figure. But the very power of that myth hides a more important truth. It focuses on a single, dramatic moment at a bridge that was captured by luck, obscuring the systematic, anonymous, and lethal work required everywhere else. To see that system in action, and its life or death consequences, we must leave the legend behind. We must go to the night of March 22nd, just hours before General Patton attempted his own audacious crossing. At Nierstein, south of Mainz, a canvas assault boat from the 11th Infantry Regiment slips into the river. The men inside are not commandos. They are riflemen. The blackness is absolute, broken only by the faintest starlight reflecting on the churning water. The Rhine's current, running at 5 miles per hour, immediately grabs the fragile boat, trying to pull it downstream, away from its objective. The cold is a physical enemy, seeping through their wool uniforms, numbing their hands on the burlap-wrapped paddles. The only sounds are the rhythmic, muffled dip of the paddles and the soft gurgle of water against the hull. They are ghosts on the water, straining their eyes and ears. Then they see it. Against the slightly less black silhouette of the far bank, a shape that is too square, too low. It doesn't belong. The men freeze. Paddles are lifted from the water, held dripping in the icy air. Every man holds his breath, listening. A faint, metallic scrape carries across the water, a muffled cough. It's a sound of human carelessness, but for the men in the boat, it is a beacon. No one speaks. The patrol leader makes a slow, deliberate hand signal. On a gridded map shielded by his body, another soldier makes a single, precise pencil mark, a confirmed machine gun nest. Now, the return. The boat pivots with agonizing slowness. The current that was their enemy is now their ally, helping to pull them back. But they are still exposed, still in the pre-sighted kill zone. Each paddle stroke is a choice between speed and silence. They choose silence. The boat touches the muddy west bank with a soft bump. That one pencil mark, that single data point won through sheer nerve and stillness, is rushed to a command post. By morning, it would be translated into a set of coordinates for an artillery battery. It was one of hundreds of such fragments of a deadly puzzle, gathered in the dark to save the lives of men who would soon cross in the light. We began with the image of a single man against the Rhine, but the answer to how the river was truly crossed lies not in one heroic act, but in the collective, anonymous courage of hundreds. The massive, history-making assaults under General Patton at Nierstein and Montgomery's Operation Plunder were not simply triumphs of overwhelming force. They were built upon an invisible foundation of intelligence, laid piece by painful piece by those night patrols. Their missions, trading immense personal risk for a single coordinate on a map, allowed Allied artillery to systematically dismantle the German kill zones before the first wave of soldiers was ever committed. The final push into Germany was won as much by stealth, patience, and information as it was by tanks and bombers. The legend of the lone swimmer isn't a lie, it's a symbol for the bravery the river demanded. The reality of the quiet patrols reveals something more profound: how that bravery was organized and weaponized to achieve victory. The final overwhelming assault across the Rhine, the largest amphibious operation of the war in Europe, was a deafening roar of artillery, engines, and shouting men. But history must record that this monumental noise, the sound of the Third Reich's final collapse, did not begin with an explosion. It began with a whisper, the quietest dip of a paddle in the dark.